Hi, I'm Emile Cabot with checkyourlogs.net, MVP in Cloud and Data Center Management. Today I'm going to show you...
Hi, I'm Dave. This is actually my session. It's not Emile's session, so... Oh, wait. No, this isn't my session. So go ahead.
It is my session?
Yeah, it's your session.
Okay. What are we going to talk about today?
Are we live?
Yeah, we're live.
Are we going to actually do this session live from MVP Summit?
Why not?
I guess so. I guess we should kind of make sure that we're both in the camera.
Yeah.
I hope we can actually
we are.
see me.
We are. Yeah, we're there.
Okay,
Yeah.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to show you guys how to build your very first Windows 10 task sequence.
And why is that important, Emile?
Well, not everybody has autopilot. So
Autopilot.
we still need a way to deploy Windows. Autopilot is the new way of joining a machine to an organization.
When I think about autopilot, Emile, I think about like a big 747 and the pilot needs to go to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
So he presses that button
Mm-hmm.
and then the plane flies itself.
Pretty much.
So you're telling me that you can deploy Windows by just pressing a button?
No, completely different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope that you can teach us a little bit about that and maybe helping customers get to Windows 10
Absolutely.
in this session. Okay.
Okay, so what we've got here is we've got a Windows Server 2016 machine, and we've installed the Windows 10 Assessment and Deployment Toolkit. It's just a free download, as well as the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, another free download. Once we have both of those installed, we're going to go to the Start button. And under Microsoft Deployment Toolkit here, we're going to launch the Deployment Workbench.
I'll come check back in with you.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Dave. So now we have our deployment share here, but there's nothing. So we're going to right-click. We're going to say New Deployment Share, and we're going to put this in the E drive on this machine. And we're just going to pick all the defaults here because we can really customize everything after. Now we have our deployment share. The very first thing that we want to do is import our operating system. So if we right-click on that and choose import, these are the options that we have. I have an ISO file on my host. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mount that as a DVD drive in Hyper-V. And that will give us access to Windows 10 1709. Yeah, we're not going to use Windows 10 S. We're going to be using Windows 10 Pro. It all uses the same source information. That's why it just defaults to 1. And then we click Next and Import. So it's going to copy over the files. Thanks to the power of NVMe drives, everything is very, very fast now and doesn't really take a whole lot of time to copy this 5 gigs of data over. And it's done. So now we click Finish. And we're going to right-click on Task Sequences here. We're going to say New Task Sequence. We're going to give the task sequence an ID. And we're going to pick the default option here to create a client, or a standard client task sequence. We're going to click Next. Here is where we pick the edition of Windows that we want. In this instance, we're going to choose Windows 10 Pro. We're not going to bother with the product key at this time. We're going to set an administrator password. What are you doing, Dave?
Trying to see if you're sweating.
So we're here today at in Redmond and at the Microsoft campus. It's for MVP Summit, so there's a couple thousand of us here. And a few of the guys are making this a little bit difficult for me. Okay, so now we've got our task sequence. If we go
Okay,
in
I'm
here,
back.
we can see that. Hi, Dave. We
Hi.
just created our task sequence while you were gone.
Oh, that's great. Sometimes, I got to be perfectly honest with everybody. I just gotta make sure I get in the picture here. Got to be perfectly honest with everybody. I had to go to the bathroom.
Okay,
So I'm better now.
perfect.
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
I'm glad. So, you know what? You can even build a task sequence, even having to go to the bathroom in 5 minutes and just get your buddy to do all the work.
Was this continuing on with the autopilot discussion?
It was. Yeah.
Okay, so now we have a task sequence, and out of box, this will do exactly what we've told it to do. It's going to install Windows 10 in a machine. There's really not a whole lot of things that we need to do out of box to tweak this or to make it better.
Cool.
A few things that we would like to do, though, especially if we're going to be deploying this out for a business case, and there is, for example, an application that everybody is going to get.
Yep.
We can put that application inside of here and then make sure that that gets laid down when the machine gets imaged. Outside of that, all of the information will be requested of us when we build our machine.
What are some of the deployment options that you have once we finish building this task sequence? Because I think we can take this task sequence and we could maybe build some ISO boot media. Could we deploy from a USB stick if we wanted to?
Yep.
How about over the network? Could we do Pixie boot from maybe Windows Deployment
Yeah,
Services?
you can install Windows Deployment Services and then just add your MDT boot image in here.
Nice. And I think that one of the best parts about MDT that I like is there's no licensing cost to the customer for this.
Absolutely, it's completely free.
Yep.
And this task sequence out of box will allow you to do what we call the 3 major configuration passes. So this will do bare metal. By bare metal, we mean a brand new computer with no information on the hard drive at all. It will format partition that hard drive, Dave, and then it'll put down Windows 10 onto this machine. If we have a computer right now that has Windows 7 on it, we can take that, forward that over to Windows 10, clean it up, lay everything down, again, the way we go. It'll have that same consistent image no matter how we deploy this.
Now, I remember in previous versions of the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, Emile, you would have to make quite a few tweaks to the task sequence to get things to work. And one of the things that I found in working with deploying Windows 10 for a lot of kind of small to mid-size companies is that this works pretty close to out of box. Like within maybe a matter of like half an hour, 20 minutes, you're kind of deploying your first system.
Yep, absolutely. The beauty about Windows 10 is it has a very, very wide range of driver support, especially on the network.
Yep.
So a lot of mainstream machines that you'll be deploying this to, we don't even need to add in any drivers here to get this to work. But there are some machines we will need to do that. So that's something that we should go into, is how to actually add a driver into here.
We can save the driver stuff for another sequence. I think what we wanted to get across in this one was how easy it was to actually deploy Windows 10 using a task sequence. So do you think we can do that? We can finish up this task sequence and see if we can actually get it pushing down to a machine and then come back to a few settings?
Yeah, absolutely.
So where are we at right now? Because while I was in the gentleman's room,
Yep.
I didn't see what you did.
No,
so maybe just a real quick recap for me.
All we've done is imported our operating system.
Okay.
And we've created that single task sequence. We haven't made any changes at all.
All
so
right.
what we want to do first is right-click on the MDT deployment share here and go into Properties. And we need to make sure that we have the platform selected that we're going to be using.
Okay.
So if we're using 64-bit, we need to have 64-bit here turned on. Under the rules, this is where we do a lot of the customization into MDT, and this can get very, very complex. Out of box, we don't need to touch this. This just makes things a little easier for us if we're going to be doing this, hundreds of times.
So we'll call this a little bit more of maybe an advanced configuration.
Precisely.
For me, how I like to relate this to people when you look at the settings files is, let's say that you wanted to have the task sequence behave differently on different networks.
Yep.
So we could do something like a default gateway lookup via the custom settings file here. And then what we could do is say, if you're on gateway 1.1.1, then I want you to pull from a different deployment share, maybe one that's local.
Exactly.
Or I want you to have different profile settings, or language settings are very important for worldwide deployments, because maybe this network we know is in France, so we want to have native French keyboards loaded, when we image those machines.
Right, as well as simple things like making sure that every machine has a recent backup,
Yes.
right? Or backs up as part of the sequence. We can do those things. Here on the Windows PE tab, again, there's not a whole lot of things that we want to do, but we want to make sure that we are creating this ISO image, especially if we're going to be deploying this to any virtual machines. Right?
Absolutely.
We want to be
Now-
able to create that ISO.
Now, one of the things I find when I'm first learning MDT, and when I was first learning MDT,
Mm-hmm.
the light bulb didn't really click for me as to the folder structure and how all of this stuff works. So for you out there, if you're watching this, and it's your very first time looking at task sequence, this work artifact that we're working inside of here in the UI is nothing more than a folder.
Yep.
And that folder is actually just living somewhere on the drive of the deployment server. In theory, you could actually just completely copy and paste that folder over to another server, import it in, and you can start over again with your MDT work.
Yeah, and everything that we're creating here through these screens is really all driven by a whole bunch of VB scripts and XML scripts in the back end.
VB scripts, this sounds pretty old.
It is pretty old. It's been around for 25 years.
Yeah, probably a billion seats of Windows have been deployed using this tooling.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But yeah, that's it. So we clicked OK. We actually didn't make any changes in here at all, Dave. Just made sure that some things were checked off. Oh, this is an important one, scratch space. This actually creates the size of the RAM drive
Yes.
of your boot image.
So depending on what you're doing, you might want to increase that. Normally, I'll increase that to a minimum of about 128 when I do it, but I think go all the way up to 512.
Yeah, and it doesn't make your size any bigger because it just tells the machine how much memory to take to build that hard drive. So that's it. We are creating our ISO. That's what we're going to create our USB key with afterwards.
Okay.
And that's it. We'll click OK.
Because the size of your image does matter.
The size of your image absolutely does matter.
Yes.
So now what I'm going to do that we have imported an operating system and I've created a task sequence.
Yep.
I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say update deployment share.
Sounds good.
This is going to create my boot images for me.
Perfect. Well, when you click next year, I think we're going to see a little bit of work happening with the progress bar. And the first time you do this, it does take a little while.
Yeah.
Because it has to crack the install WIM, and it actually has to build the bootloaders for you, build the ISOs, do all that work for you. You don't even have to run separate commands to do this. The cool part about MDT as well, for your PowerShell fans out there, is that there's PowerShell providers and PowerShell modules to manage and automate all of this, even although the backend tooling is all VB scripts.
Absolutely.
The PowerShell framework is there, so you could automate 100% of this in PowerShell if you wanted to. Now, while that's running, why don't you just go take a really quick look, Emile, at the folder structure for your MDT deployment folder, and we'll show where this ISO is going to be located, because that's going to be important, because we'll have to use that ISO and then copy it over to our Hyper-V host and try to actually install Windows into a VM, right?
Right. So you'll remember at the start when we launched the deployment workbench, we created that deployment share. That created this folder. Inside of this folder, we have a list. OEM doesn't have anything. As we add applications into the deployment workbench, subfolders actually get created here with the application installers. If we are capturing a machine's backup as a part of this upgrade, then the backups typically would get stored here.
Now, that might not be a desired location. It's a default location that you have. You might want to point that to a NAS or something like that you have on the network.
Or somewhere that's close to the user.
And that's where your settings file would come in, is you actually point it to some localized storage.
Yeah. So here's the boot folder, and that's where our boot images will ultimately come down.
Cool.
Captures. This is for users, what they call USMT, user state migration, to take the user's settings, right? If you're going from an old computer to a new computer, then this will take the user's desktops, documents, Outlook information.
Once again, a configurable setting. That might be want to go to a NAS device as well as you expand some of the advanced settings. And when I'm thinking with these sessions, just because we're doing the quick hitter sessions for MVP days here, we're going to compartmentalize these into just very specific focused tasks that we're going to go through. So today, we're just going to stand up the deployment, your very first MDT share. We're going to take and we're going to create a very basic task sequence, and we're going to deploy it. In the more advanced sessions, we'll build on this where we can maybe customize, maybe add some drivers, maybe take a look at some tweaks, some customization, some cool things. And I think we can kind of have a running flavor with that for a few months here.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so how far along is that in the process there, Emile?
It's about halfway.
All right. It does take probably, I would say, if you're not on an all-flash machine, because I've had some customers run this just on regular servers with spinning disks, that process can take up to 10 minutes. But I find on a machine that's running on flash, this is typically about a 4-minute process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're just about done now. And the mounting process has been done now. It's just processing that boot image.
Now we love to do live demos here on the MVPDays sessions that Emile and I do. So I didn't check with you. Does your MDT server have connectivity back to the host? Can you copy that file back out to the host? Is that possible?
At some way, I'm sure I can. Yep.
What we may do is we may just pause the video while we just copy that ISO out to the host, because we might have to actually tweak some of the networking settings here to pull that out, just so we can show you the finished product here. So maybe what we'll do is let's just pause the video here, Emile, real quick, and then we'll jump back in as soon as that progress bar is done, and we will copy out the ISO image.
Sounds good. And we're back, and the process has completed successfully. It finished all of that stuff. And now if we go back and look into this boot folder, we now have an ISO.
Perfect.
So I've copied that over to my host. And now we're going to use that to create a new virtual machine. New virtual machine. Next. MVP Summit VM01. I'm going to store this in my VMs directory. We're going to do a Gen 2 VM because we like security.
Absolutely.
We're going to give it
Absolutely. As I
2
turn
gigs
my
of
mic back on.
memory.
Check.
And we're going to give us a default switch.
Do you have DHCP running in there?
I do.
Okay.
And we're going to create a virtual hard disk.
And what are we doing right now?
We're just creating a virtual machine. We're simulating getting a new computer.
Okay. So this is going to be like a test build of just a machine with a formatted hard drive.
Yep. So basically what I'm doing right here is I'm putting the USB key into the drive.
Okay.
And with my new VM.
And we're at about 17 minutes right now. So I was telling myself it'd be really cool if you could get all this done
in 20 minutes?
In 20 minutes or less.
I've got an NVMe drive, so let's see.
Perfect.
We're going to start my VM.
Now your recording screen, you should be able to see that. I think you're still inside the window, so that's good. So now this ISO is going to mount. It's going to boot. The beauty of NVMe technology makes this super fast. It will connect up to the deployment folder. It might ask us for some credentials because I don't think we pre-populated credentials.
We didn't populate anything. So these are things that we typically would automate in that notepad window that I showed you earlier.
That's right. So it's going to prompt us for probably some creds to connect to the deployment share here, which is completely normal. Emile's banking password is P@SSW0RD112233 4455.
And wrong network.
That would be a problem. A little bit of a troubleshooting tip. We can actually attach to the right network here. Now, one of the little tricks is, just before you hit OK there, Emile, is how did you get that command prompt window open there?
I hit the F8 key.
F8 key opens up the command prompt, so now you can actually troubleshoot networking stack and issues inside of Windows PE. We had a question from the audience here, and is this using PowerShell? No, this is using Windows PE technology. PowerShell is included inside of there.
Now I can connect that I'm on the right network.
Yes, we threw in a little bit of bonus troubleshooting. Emile's actually at 19 minutes and 30 seconds, so do you think he's going to be able to get there? Dun, dun, dun. I feel like a lot of next finish is going to happen here. And we're basically just choosing default settings to roll the operating system. You can see there's lots of settings for BitLocker and stuff like that. Now it's going to take and format the operating system. And in all honesty, Emile, on your NVMe class laptop Hyper-V machine here, it'll probably actually finish this build
in 4 minutes.
Yeah, about 3-4 minutes. It'll actually probably have this thing finished. So let's just recap a little bit about what we've done so far in order to get ourselves to this point, because you had a few prerequisites on your machine in order to get MDT installed.
Yep.
One of the prerequisites that you need is to actually download the ADK. And what is the ADK?
The ADK is the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit.
Now remember, Emile, you're recording a subset of your screen here, so you'll have to pull that into context for people so they can.
So let's drag that back over here. I'm into Bing, and we're gonna go download Win. Oh, I typed it in a minute ago, so there it is. Win 10 ADK.
Yep.
That brings us to a website here, and downloads a really, really, really small file.
Okay, and then basically you choose a few options now. Another way of doing this, we've actually documented this going through a couple of our books as well. There's lots of instructions on the base install of MDT.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do another session on the prerequisite basics of this another day. But basically, you need the ADK, then you download the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit.
Right.
You want to make sure you match the versions though. So there are different versions of the automated the assessment deployment kit. Right now, I use the 1709 version, which was the fall release. There will be a new release with the new version of Windows that's going to be coming out here shortly.
Right.
You want to make sure that you kind of maintain that as you're building, just to make sure that you can stay current on the builds. And then the builds of MDT as well. You want to make sure that you have the current builds.
Yeah, so typically with every major release of Windows, so right now that's going to be in March and September. When Microsoft releases a new build of Windows, they will be releasing a new ADK to go along with that. And more often than not, there's even going to be an upgrade to MDT as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, so we say that we've installed, it's just on any regular Windows Server 2016 or 2012 R2 box, we can install that. Install those two prerequisites. Just takes a few minutes. It takes a little while to do the ADK because it does download quite a few components.
Yeah.
So I would say the prerequisites take maybe 45 minutes to get you to the point where you've clicked next finish to get MDT installed, and then you can basically go through the initial task sequencing creation. Now, there's a lot more that you can do under the covers with this, but at the end of the day, if your job was to get a Windows 10 desktop pushed out, you've got the ability to do this. And now you just kind of, like anything, build on the capabilities through the console and the UI.
Exactly.
Right? So this is going to finish. Like I said, this will complete and wrap up here in a few minutes. And you know what? I think at that, we've got a pretty solid session here. Any final closing thoughts for our fearless viewers that are watching this session?
No. This is, very, very basic. This is the very, very first steps to do. Surprisingly enough, what we've shown you today will get you through the hump and get you a lot of the way there. And, hopefully it won't take much to get your whole organization up to Win 10.
Awesome. Well, you know what, guys? Thank you very much. And with that, I think we are going to wrap up this session. Hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions for MVP Days. And you can check for the session on the post-session recordings as well. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'm waiting to hit stop because it's gonna hit 100 and reboot. There we go.
We're not supposed to leave the outtakes in the video here, Emile.
What outtakes?
The outtakes that are coming up next if you don't hit pause.
Oh! And there we go. Wait. Oh, we're not done yet.
Oh, wait. And we're back overtime here in this session. You thought that we were done, but we're not really done because we're waiting for this thing to boot up and actually show you that it's going to start installing Windows. And we have a giant black screen.
Do you see the big blue E? No, just the big black nothing. It will load. It will load.
Maybe if you had a better laptop.
Okay, stop moving. I'm going to pause.
What's wrong?
Oh, you know what's wrong?
No, what's wrong?
It's because it's bumping back and forth. I double click on this, I'll see stuff now.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
See?
All right,
So
now we're
we
really
go.
going to end the session.
Now we're looking at Windows 10. Yeah, and it's just going through the mini setup now. So thanks, everyone.